Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Earlier this week, the Department of Energy outlined its vision for an evolution towards cleaner fuels in South Africa. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the development and its implications. Terence, welcome to Second Take. Why are these specifications important and what new standards have been proposed?
Well, they're important because they affect human health primarily and the environment, as well as they've been the dirty fuels that we have at the moment have actually prevented us from introducing some of the newer generation engines into the South African vehicle fleet. On the human health side, when we reduced the lead in petrol, actually eliminated and prohibited it, there have been human health benefits. And this is part of this evolution towards cleaning up the fuel so that there's less carcinogens. So for instance, there's going to be a move to reduce the benzene content from 5% to 1%. And there's also going to be a move to reduce the sulfur content from the current 500 parts per million down to 10 parts per million. So it's quite a big move. If you remember, before 2006, we had fuel that had a sulfur content with 3,000 parts per million. So you can see it's a fairly big development and evolution. And also what we're seeing is an introduction of what people call a Euro 5 type fuel. They're saying very clearly this is a Cleaner Fuel 2 specification for South Africa. It's a South African specification, but really it's a Euro 5 type standard, which opens up the whole vehicle technologies, the new vehicle technologies, the latest and the greatest in terms of energy efficiency that can be introduced to South Africa's roads.
A shift to cleaner fuels will involve big investment costs. How will this be funded?
Well, that is very unclear at this stage. What we really have is a discussion document saying these are the standards we're proposing and the specifications we're proposing, and we're proposing to introduce this from 2013, and we will do it through importation initially, and then we will eventually want our refinery fleet by 2017 to be compliant, and it will be mandatory and it will be a national standard, so no one will be able to deviate from these new fuel standards. So how to fund this is going to be the tricky part of the equation, and something that's going to be open for debate. I think there will be some discussion around the actual standard itself and whether it's appropriate for South Africa, but I think ultimately a lot of the focus is going to be from the refiner side is how do they go about funding this, because it's a big capital investment. The initial first blush is 28 billion rand, but other people say it's probably between 28 billion rand up to 40 billion rand. And there could be volume implications as well. Last time we went to a cleaner fuel, the first generation of cleaner fuels, we saw a number of refineries having to reduce their volumes in order to get to those new standards. And we've seen a steady rise in importation since then. So yes, the costs are going to be a very big issue, and how to fund that is going to be a very big issue. And the refiners are already, and government are signaling that there might be some sort of cost recovery mechanism built into this, because it's a regulated industry, so can't just pass this on to the consumer. They have to find a way through the regulatory mechanism to maybe recover the costs. And there's talking about using tax instruments and all sorts of things to make these cleaner fuels competitive with the older generation fuels. But it's not been the proposal doesn't contain the cost recovery mechanism yet, and there may be another discussion paper, possibly from National Treasury, to come on that issue.
Does this cleaner fuel vision gel with South Africa's policy that security of supply should mainly be met from local refineries?
That's also a bit debatable. What we've seen over the last few years, as I said, our refining capacity was, the nameplates actually reduced when we moved up the fuel standard hierarchy. And again, there's that threat this time around, potentially. And what we've been doing is meeting the growing demand through a rapid rise in imports. So we really are fairly reliant on importation of fuels. And I think definitely the 2013 date, and the automotive industry wanted it to be 2012 because they want these new engines introduced into South Africa sooner rather than later, as well as we are an exportation hub for vehicles produced not just for South Africa but for the rest of the world. So they want to have those engines not just for their exports but also for the local market, create economies of scale. It has benefits for the component manufacturing industry, etc. So you can see why they are pushing hard for it and why government wants to support it, as well as government has clear greenhouse gas reduction targets, and they have to introduce some of these to the transport sector, which is a contributor, the power sector being the main contributor, and the fuel sector also being a major contributor, given that a lot of our fuel comes from coal. But the transport sector does contribute to greenhouse gases, and we have made commitments at Copenhagen, plus we're hosting the next round of COP talks, the COP17 in Durban later this year. So we are putting our cards sort of on the table as to how we're going to start reducing this. So, but on the other hand, our energy policy says that we should primarily meet our local demand with local refining capacity. And at this stage, it's very clear we don't have the capacity to produce these cleaner fuels, so importations will probably rise, or we will just stop importing dirtier fuels and import cleaner ones. We've got an immediate impediment there because we're saying 2013 is the implementation date. By the beginning of 2013, the new multi-product pipeline is not in place, so then there's a logistical issue. We're going to possibly have a fourth grade of petrol coming up into the Gauteng area, because you'll have lead replacement plus the 93 and the 95 plus this cleaner fuel potentially. So there are logistical headaches around that, and that will have to be discussed, how that cost is borne and how we should go about transporting that fuel. But also the bigger picture in terms of local refining, we're in a sort of hiatus period. We know there's a project Matombo down in the Eastern Cape that's a greenfield refinery, probably oversized, very far from the logistical network. We've also got Sasol with its coal to liquids plan up in Limpopo province, which is sort of also in a holding pattern until there's some clarity. They're doing tests on the coal, but they're saying, they can't really go ahead if Matombo is going ahead. Plus we had the oil companies approaching government recently and saying, hey, hold on. Really, do we need a new greenfield refinery? Shouldn't we look at importation options, or a hybrid option of importation and expanding the refineries with the cleaner fuels specifications? So at the moment it's quite fuzzy, and I think some country decisions have to be made quite soon, and some of those are going to be popular, some of those will be very unpopular, some of them will have serious cost implications, but I don't think we can leave it for much longer if our security of supply is built on local manufacture.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.
Led by Terence Creamer, Mining Weekly's bureaus in Perth, Johannesburg and Toronto deliver unrivaled global coverage of the resources industry and the companies shaping it. Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, for mining news around the clock.